Hi, it's dinner time. All right, today I'm gonna be making Facebook calls it a Korean beef bibimbap with gochujang aioli, rice, a little bit of veg, beef, and then an aioli that's got spicy chili paste on it. Which I don't feel like doing it because I've been eating way too much pasta lately, and I need to change it up a little. One-handed. Watch this. But what am I going to be talking about while I'm making dinner and ranting to myself with a camera with no music in the background, purely because I can, and I'm definitely so sane right now. I am going to be talking about my favorite setting in fantasy, I guess you could. Yeah, it's fantasy, I guess. Different spot for the camera this time, hopefully just for framing sakes. Mostly just so that it's not so close to the light and the fridge, so that hopefully you're not going to be getting a ringing kind of sensation. We'll see, who knows. But if I was to describe to you guys, or mention to you guys, a sort of order of franchises, as it were, some franchises which uses this particular setting. First to show up was the cartoon Robin Hood, which released in a time period. Does it even say back here? Cartoon Robin Hood. Cartoon Robin Hood was released in 1973, so that movie came out in 1973. After that, we had a series called Red Wall. I've never actually seen this one. It was a book series, and then it wound up being like a TV show kind of thing. And then we have two kind of modern versions. I'm thinking Humblewood, which is a kind of Dungeons and Dragons campaign setting. We also have Root, and all of its many iterations and expansions, because I'm a complete dork. All of those kind of franchises, they all share a similar setting. And hopefully it's fairly obvious. We're going to be talking about the animal kingdom turned into the medieval kingdom kind of thing. And this is just outright my favorite setting. Why is it? It's just, you get a whole bunch of critters in their kind of forest. 5-second rule! Chopping up carrots, chopping up, chop, choppity, chop, over the hills we go. But why? Shoot, that's the wrong cut of meat. Oh, this setting is just so much fun in general. There's just so much you can do with it. It's strange, but it's also just very nice. My least favorite part about these weird spice kind of container things. So, if you're curious, the spices on the meat is just garlic powder, onion powder, salt and pepper. You know, basic stuff for meat. Why these things? Oh. Everything has a seal on it today. It's weird. It's a good thing that I like spicy food, otherwise we'd be hooped. Very thankfully, I just caught the camera as the battery was completely running out from the last video, so put a new one in, and we're seeing how this goes. I like to think that this aioli is looking pretty decent here. Veg, all here. All of this green here, the spinach and arugula, that's gonna get thrown in with the steak there pretty quick. It'll kind of wilt down to a much smaller size, be much more palatable, and then the carrots and then the green onion will just go on top of the rice kind of thing. I noticed when I was editing the last video that I say kind of thing a lot of the time. That's almost like a placement filler, and that's want to try and kick that curve, kick that habit a little bit. I'm majestic on my flips. Probably not very, but that's fine. So I think I'll just leave it there, and but yeah, I don't know. I like the Animal Kingdom, Medieval Kingdom setting. It mixes very nicely, and it's charming, and it's fun, and Cartoon Robin Hood is still one of my top 5 movies, easily. I always think this is funny. You guys saw just how much of the greens that I had piled up on that plate there, and just how much it reduced down. It's always so funny whenever this happens. I don't know. Put some of this veg on top here, Not all of it. Some of the meat slash greens. I don't know. How's that looking so far? Pretty decent. I got our aioli. Put a couple spoons of that on there. And then we'll finish it off with a healthy dose of the green onion. And that's it right there. Should be decent. We'll see, I guess. Alright, thanks for joining me. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Hopefully this works. Hello there. So, after a brief review of that complete and utter nonsense that I tried to make yesterday, I decided that the rant needed a bit more of an explanation. Clearly, I wasn't thinking all the way straight there, and that needed to be remedied, because there was clearly no fruit line in what I was trying to say there in regards to forestry, animal kingdom setting, and that needed to be fixed. So, as it turns out, making notes turns out to be very helpful, because what you saw earlier was basically the equivalent of all of a sudden realizing that your name is called in the university class for a presentation that you completely forgot about, and you needed to kind of make something up on the spot. That doesn't end up well. I can speak from experience. But it turns out with a little bit of prep work, and it doesn't take much, that all of a sudden your thoughts can get a lot more coherent. So what I'm going to do now is try to demonstrate some halfway coherent thoughts out of that mess that I tried to make. And yeah, maybe just try to bring everything together a little bit. So the question that was core on my mind after I thought about this a little bit was, look at my little notes here, why the animal kingdom in the forest setting sticks itself in the human imagination. Because this animal kingdom, medieval kingdom in the forest setting, it sticks around in the human imagination a lot, and importantly, it's not new. What do we got here? So there are cats and dogs and a vast variety of medieval tapestries. I think I mentioned that in that ranty thing before, but importantly, that's not the only case. We could look at Shintoism with the animal spirits kind of thing, right? You know, there's a lot of emphasis on deer and fox. I mean, even if we look back at the Bible and Genesis and the snake tempting Adam and Eve, right? So animals being characters that expands on the human imagination is not a new thing by any means. Now, my immediate thought turns to, well, if we're thinking about the animal kingdom in the forest mixed with the medieval kingdom, let's break this apart into pieces. So my first thought is, what is the human interaction with animals? When I thought about this, it turned out that generally human interactions with animals tends to be, beyond anything else, very brief. What are the three most common places that you're going to see animals as a human? The first one, probably the zoo. But let's call it what it is. The zoo is not exactly a natural place to see an animal kind of thing. It's very curated. It's very presented towards you as opposed to seeing animals as they are. So I don't think a zoo really gives us an accurate representation of animals living their lives. Now, the other exceptions, I personally can think of two. The first is when I'm driving along the highway and there's, a deer or a bear, or if I'm just driving down a regular road, maybe you see a squirrel like scurrying by kind of thing. And then the other case would be with hiking. You go along, you're hiking, and you'll see, a moose walking by, going around making their dam kind of thing. I think in both of these cases, the thing that immediately pokes out to me is that your actual interaction with them is really brief, and usually a case of the animals being docile, at least 99% of the time. Yeah, there's some freak accidents out there, but most of the time, the animals are quite docile, quite tame, right? So, that begs the question, if what we see of animals is so brief, what are they doing with the rest of their time? The rest of their life that we're not seeing kind of thing? Because, let's be honest, when we're talking about people, we see, our close family members, our close friends for a good, healthy amount of time and in one go, especially if you're living in the same household kind of thing. So you kind of get a sense of what they're doing most of the time. But with animals, we get such a brief glimpse into their lives, and again, I don't think zoos count here, that it leaves a lot to the imagination. What are they doing when you're not seeing them? So as an example, your dog goes missing from your house for a little bit and you're searching for them. What is the possibility of the dog, we're thinking about the medieval kingdom here, going out and being, a guard dog in a medieval kingdom, being like a guardsman or a crusader or something like that, right? Or what about deer, right? Are deer mailmen? And I'm thinking back to the Shintoism kind of thing where deers are often represented as being messengers of gods. Foxes are as well. Or are beavers, they're architects in the sense that they're building their dams and, making their homesteads there. Are they architects and engineers in this forest medieval kingdom, right? If we don't see them for so much of the day, then we can let our imagination kind of spill over into our creations, into our settings like this, and then beg the question, well, we see animals for such this little bit period of time. What if they're actually way more intelligent, way more aware of what's going on than we let them seem to be? And along with that, I find that most of these settings, or most of these examples of the medieval kingdom mixed with the animal kingdom, they tend to take place in forests. But do they need to take place in forests? Well, I think that a forest is kind of a easy one, I guess. It's the most accessible. A lot of people live near forests kind of thing. And especially when you're talking about a medieval kingdom that's 99% of the time based off of a European medieval kingdom, then you're probably going to run into most animals living in a forest, right? And I think the reason that we focus in on forests is usually because there's a sense of mystery involved there. When you're walking along and you're looking through the forest, you don't usually see all the way through the forest. Usually there's the horizon getting in the way, or more trees or bushes or something like that that's getting in the way of you seeing all the way through the forest. We can extend this further, like if we think about the desert and all the sand, what's going on underneath the sands? What's hidden underneath there? Are there deserts hidden underneath the sands? Or if we think about the ocean, right? It's so difficult to see through water a long period of the way. Maybe we're missing something, right? Atlantis is probably coming from this, probably, I would think. I don't know, maybe. So I think that the idea of places in nature that is hiding a kingdom or a civilization that the animals inhabit kind of adds a sense of mystery there. And these settings that allows for these kind of questions to come up really lends itself to these kinds of settings. And I think that what we're seeing with these animal kingdoms, medieval kingdoms kind of mixing together is, well, really just a healthy mixing of those two ideas. What do animals do when they're not being animals around us? What kind of things could be going on in these environments that we can't observe all the way? And these aren't new questions, and importantly, this is not an inaccurate question. There's a book, The Lost City of the Monkey God, written by Douglas Preston, where he goes to a certain area in South America and using technology is able to find old ruins from probably the Mayans that is deeply buried in the forest. And that immediately brings to mind these medieval kingdom settings that are so deep in the forest that we'd never be able to see them, and it just brings the imagination forward in the human brain. So I think that the main reason why these settings stick so well in the human imagination, and especially with my human imagination, is that this kind of setting allows for you to ask so many what-if questions. They're accessible ways for the imagination to spring forth. And I think that this allows for these kind of settings to have a very nice mix of curiosity but whimsy in there. And that allows for these kind of settings, these kind of worlds to really inhabit the mind in a way that is oddly quite healthy, I think, for humans. Because if you ask so many of these what-if questions,
But I think the same idea can kind of apply to this medieval kingdom, where it all begins with questions of what if, and you just let your imagination take over. And they wind up making these worlds that are so beloved and just whimsical and fun. And I think it winds up being a very lovely kind of setting that personally I don't mind throwing myself into and enjoying them for what they are. With that in mind, hopefully this makes a bit more sense. Still not pristine, but whatever. You're probably seeing my dishes there from my dinner. So yeah, thanks for hanging out and sticking around for this long so that I can explain my absolute nonsense just going absolutely everywhere from yesterday and allowing me to explain myself. Thank you. Have a good evening.